So the way to start this, like I always like to do, is give yourself some sort of loose reference to give yourself a place to place the ears and all that stuff. And if you can either start with the ears or the nose. I prefer the nose because it gives me an idea of how far away the eyes should be. So their snout, let's do his nose first, which sort of has a rough indentation like this. Almost like you're drawing a tooth. And of course it rounds off pretty nicely. And I'm drawing this pretty quickly. I've got somewhere to be, so I'm hoping I can get this done in time. And the mouth starts roughly here. And again, their snout and then their jowls, they kind of come over the top. And most canines look this way. There's different variations of it, but they have their snout kind of coming off this way. And the same thing with this side. I'm just keeping this really tight. I mean, really loose, not really tight, sorry. And then there's a bit of darkness here, usually because their lips are showing underneath, somewhere in here. And then you'll have a little bit of their chin jutting out right about there. And again, this is a pretty generalized way to draw a dog, and it works for me. So this is not going to be a super hyper-realistic drawing of a dog. It's just to get the idea of how to draw one. And their snout kind of comes, their nose, I mean, their nostrils sort of bury into the nose like that. Sort of like a, I'm trying to draw the simple shapes. There's an ovular and then a little cone type comes off the top, almost like a comma, if you will. Again, you don't have to be perfect because no animal is absolutely symmetrically perfect. And with the top here, you can usually give an indication that there's a roundness to the nose here. So this is kind of the top of the nose looking down this way. And then following, similar to cats, if you follow this line roughly here, you give that really tight. Their eyes are almost beady compared to the rest of their face. And they do, much like cats, they have that really dark surrounding their eye. And I just rough in the shape of the eye first. And then you kind of pull it in down so it tightens up like that. And then they have sort of a sharpness to their eye, something like that. And don't go too heavily detailed right now. That's just the basic idea. You know, you want to start to cut in. And this is a very, very light pencil. It's a Mechanico. It's a, a drafting pencil, really. But I like it because I can put in a lot of work. Pretty early on, you can start digging into the design without, you can see how light it is so that you don't over commit to anything. Again, I'm drawing this from way back, so I'm not trying to excuse myself, but I am trying to let you know that if it looks a little off, that's probably why I'm not looking directly over top of what I'm drawing right now. Let me get in here for a second. So basically, there's the eyes. And then when you go, I always cut in the majority of the face. So then here, make like a rough triangle shape. Their ears are really big, and they have that. I'm doing this just for illustration purposes, no pun intended. They have sort of like their fur comes around this way, and then their fur on their face, rather like their snout and their jawline, is very thin. And I imagine this so they can eat. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not trying to tell you things that aren't true, but I'm conjecturing here. It's conjecture. It's just my thoughts. Maybe that's how they evolved. Whatever your stance is on that. Sorry. It's just how I think of it. Try to make anybody mad. Dogs were bred for sure, though. I mean, there's dogs that we know are descendants of wolves. So there's some, not the wolves that we have now, but a wolf-like dog. Yeah, see, I got a little early on that. So you get that cut in a little bit, you know, and then this is a very thin strip of fur here. And like I said, I didn't really do this as wild as I should have. This right here, their jowls, their lips is what it really is. Kind of comes out fat right there. And then they have a darkness above their lips. And like I said, their lip line is here, and I can always do that with inking if I want. But that just gives you a close approximation of what he should look like. And when you do the ears, they're just giant triangles. They're rounded, but they're big ears on dogs. Well, on wolves. They're almost disproportionately large than what you might imagine they should look like. And again, just cut it in. You know, see how loose I'm being and sort of relaxed? That's kind of the best way to go about it. And their ear sort of follows the curve of that. That's why the circle's good. It sort of follows that curve like this. And same thing here. Big old fat ear. And it looks a little cartoony right now, but as you go and you keep sculpting it, you can make it look better. Like their ear isn't quite this dramatic. You know, you might kind of overdid that ear that side. But the center of where the center of their eye is, basically, that's where the point more or less comes if you're looking straight at them. And the same thing with this side. And we can correct this later, like I said, and give him some crazy fur on top of his head. And you know, if you look at enough wolves, they all have their own look to them. They're very personality-like. But they do have this giant V-like shape to their face. And then they have that fur comes off the backside. And of course, you can get crazy with it and do what you want. And then the pattern is what really cuts it back in. You cut this down around their nose. You can start to see the shape of a wolf better. They have that very defined look. And again, I kind of didn't give myself a lot of room for the ears here. They're a little... No, it's fine. You know what? Look. Basically, they're shaped something like this. All right. And, of course, cut the size of them down a little bit if you'd like to, like that. Again, this is just a preliminary stage. You can keep going and really refine it. But I'm just trying to give you the basic idea of how of what to draw, like what the key elements are that really make a wolf look like a wolf. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. Well, trying to anyway. And they have their ears sort of tufts in like this, and then they have the fur that goes all kinds of crazy. And you could really take your time and make that look good. But again, I'm just trying to show you this as quickly as I can. I'm also kind of challenging myself to see if I can do it that quickly. But they have sort of the impression of fur here, and then this is on this dog, this wolf. His ear is very dark there. And again, it depends on which way you're looking at them. It depends on how they're looking at you, how their ears will look. And then just their bottom part of their fur, as it were. They all have different patterns, so you can do what you want. And then they have their feet. I don't know if you can see this on there. Their arms, their front paw. Their legs, I guess. I don't know what to call them. They go in sort of right here. So you start to see the impression of in their fur, you can see their body and then their legs, if you will. Their front legs. They kind of come out and down like that. So their forehead comes really, like I said, it kind of comes in there. I'm not explaining myself very well. They kind of dig down in, and then that fur line. Let me erase this so I can actually show you what I mean. This fur line actually comes in a little further out. Comes out a little further. So this would be like where his ear digs in, and then you'd have the majority of their forehead or whatever. It's quite pronounced, especially on this dog, this wolf. It kind of gives you the space of where their head is. It's almost like right at the top of, I mean, it's almost hitting the peak of those ears right here. So there's that. And then it's a matter of, assuming you do your base drawing well, this is where you would take your most time. I didn't because I was trying to demonstrate, but usually take your most of your time here. And really, this is where you can start to draw in the details and they start to look like their own selves. You goodbye. And yeah, this is usually more refined here. It's almost like an eyebrow line. And then you can form, more intense shading for their nose. And this, of course, is colored. And so however you want to interpret this, I'm just going for a quick. Their fur sort of follows the contour of their face, much like a cat does. So I'm not going to go through here and detail all this, but you get the idea. Starts to look like a woofy wolf. And then just shade up his nose a little bit. And this fur in here, there's quite a bit of texture in here. There's a lot of darkness in his fur. Or hers. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. I don't know. I'm just winging it. And like I said, their fur pattern is not 100% symmetrical. It's okay if you don't get it exactly right, because I guarantee you it isn't like that anyway, if you look carefully. And then you can just kind of wing it. I mean, that's what I'm doing. And like I said, I was drawing from an angle, so I don't know how good this looks to you, but hopefully it's legible enough that you can tell it's supposed to look like a wolf and that it helps you pick out the features you need to pick out. That nose, get that nose down. Do the snout and the impression of the side of their cheeks as it comes down. And then, like I said, they have almost like this triangular, or I'm sorry, diamond-like shape to their face that comes out like this. And if you overdraw somewhere, you can always use your eraser to lighten it back up. But again, I'm just giving this as an impression. So they have that little darkness in here because this is where their ear, the whole of their ear is. Kind of comes down in. This is really dark around the outer side because it's part of their main fur texture. And then as you get in, this is different colors of browns and stuff. And I'm just kind of scribbling so you can get the feeling that it's fur. You can take your time, really, but I wanted to show you the basic idea of how to draw the shape of the face and like where the eyes more or less line up with the ears. You have this usually center line pupil, and then more or less the snout is right around the edge of the eye here. And then the nose kind of follows on the inside of the eye. So if you draw little lines, you can if you want to as guides. And if you use that circle, it gives you kind of an idea of how wide the face should be relative to the nose. And believe it or not, and like I said, believe it or not, their ears are actually much further down than you might think they are. They're not like cats where their ears are, they're similar place to a cat's, but it's not as, cats there's almost sit on top of their head in comparison, or on the side more. And wolves have theirs because they have those big, fat, massive ears, and they tend to I don't know what I'm trying to say. They tend to look a little bit more bear-like. So yeah, that's my interpretation. Their fur starts to get really intense when you go past this face line. This is much thinner as you come in here, and you get to the face again, so they can eat, they can see, get stuff all over their face. Still protected from, like, say, the rain, dust, and stuff getting in their eyes and things. And of course, they do have. Speaking of which, they do have a lot of darkness here because, similar to cats, it's designed. The reasoning, or I should say, the purpose of it, is to block out the light if they're hunting, so they can see well, like, say, snow blindness and stuff like that. You tell me if you think it looks like a wolf or if it's just absolutely terrible. I mean, I think it's okay. I just wanted to share the process of how I do it when I do dogs. I have a friend that's an artist too, and he always tells me he likes the way I draw animals, so I figured I would share it with everybody. I did learn a lot from Mr. Aaron Blaze on how to draw animals. He's an incredible animal artist. Mine is definitely more comic styled now than it is, say, realism. And now Mr. Blaze, he does realism to comic-like, because Disney cartooning and stuff. So if you want to learn really how to draw this stuff, man, he's money. I tell you, that's where you should go. Anyway, that should be basically it. That's how you draw Mr. Wolf. I was just adding some fur down here in case you wanted to know. I'm just kind of winging it. Anyway, hopefully you liked that. If you do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Smash that like button. Share it with people if you think 'tis worthy of your time or theirs. Or if you learned anything, let me know. If you didn't, also let me know. I'm trying my best to kind of share with everybody what I do. And cool. Hope you like it. Thanks for watching.